Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, August 15th, 2018. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, primary results from not quite across the entire country, but parts of it. And progressives and diversity, and Trump wins. Also on the program today, report from Pennsylvania. Over 300 Catholic priests sexually assaulted children over the course of 7 decades, and the church covered it up. Also, with hearings looming, Dems cave, meet with Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh shows some skin, wants our government to fund religious schools. Meanwhile, defense rests in the Manafort case, and Omarosa haunts the White House. The heartwarming story of a conservative who's lost his way. And algae could decide the fate of the Senate in the fall. I'm going to get to those Mulvaney attacks on protections from predatory lenders. And Trump claims not to be bound by the law involving Russia and Crimea. Lastly, Lula claims a right-wing coup in Brazil. All this and more, ladies and gentlemen, on today's program. All this and more. Plus, maybe we'll get to calls early today. We'll try all that. Sure, why not? Oh, we got to turn down that fan just a little bit. Put it down to mode 2 as opposed to 4 around here.
Yes, Commander.
That's the way we do it. We're going to put that. There we go. That's much better.
You got it, man.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Michael. Good job.
You're welcome. Always ready to echo what you said to somebody else. Quite capable of that.
Folks, just a reminder, this program relies on its members for its support every day. You can become a member for less than 50 cents a day. I don't know what you're paying for cable, but I would bet that it's at least 8 1.3 times that every day. 50 cents a day. You can support this program and make it happen every day. Go to jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, a reminder, our Android app has been updated. We have one more feature, I think, searching the archive that we're going to be adding for members. But we're going to be adding some of these new features to the iOS app. Check it out. It's free. It is free. You don't have to be a member to get the app. You can listen to the show. You can IM the show. And just go to majorityapp.com. So Omarosa is apparently really, really causing havoc for the White House. And again, I don't care about Omarosa, with all due respect. I want to say I'm sure she's a nice person, but I'm not. I'm not sure. So I'm not going to say that. I want to say...
That's how you win The Apprentice. You have to be really nice to everyone.
I'm an Omarosa defender.
I want to say...
wouldn't go on that lane.
I want to say that everyone's a nice person. Meanwhile, Sarah Sanders has had to answer the question, is there a tape of Trump using the N-word? Now, we know there's not because Rob Burnett called the president and said, there's no tape of him saying the N-word. We know this from a presidential tweet. So I don't even know why people are asking this question anymore. But Sarah Sanders, based upon the fact that Rob Burnett assured us that there was no tape of President Trump saying the N-word, she's not quite convinced. Here's how she responds when Kristen Welker asks Sarah Sanders that question.
From the president's rollout last August. Kristen.
Sarah, have you asked the president if he's ever used the N-word?
The president addressed that question directly via Twitter. I'd refer you back to him. I can certainly say I've never heard him use that term or anything similar.
Have you asked him directly, Sarah?
The president, I didn't have to because he addressed it to the American people all at one time.
Why haven't you asked him directly?
Again, the president answered that question directly on Twitter earlier today.
Can you stand at the podium and guarantee the American people they'll never hear Donald Trump utter the N-word on a recording in any context?
I can't guarantee anything, but I can tell you that the president addressed this question directly. I can tell you that I've never heard it. I can also tell you that if myself or the people that are in this building serving this country every single day, doing our very best to help people all across this country and make it better, if at any point we felt that the president was who some of his critics claim him to be, we certainly wouldn't be here. This is a president who is fighting for all Americans, who is putting policies in place that help all Americans, particularly African Americans. Just look at the economy alone. This president, since he took office in the year and a half that he's been here, has created 700,000 new jobs for African Americans. That's 700,000 African Americans that are working now that weren't working when this president took place. When President Obama left after 8 years in office, he had only created 195,000 jobs for African Americans. President Trump in his first year and a half has already tripled what President Obama did in 8 years. Not only did he do that for African Americans, but for Hispanics. 1.7 million more Hispanics are working now. This is a president who cares about all Americans, who is committed to helping them, and is putting policies in place that actually do that. Kevin, sorry, Kristen.
So in other words, yes, there is a tape, and also we mistakenly lied about how many jobs Obama created for black people.
I can't guarantee anything.
I can't even vouch for the numbers I'm about to give you.
I literally
tell you right
can't
now.
guarantee anything because I'm about to give you fake numbers.
They did actually issue a correction on that, where Sarah Sanders said, we got the numbers right, we just got the time frames wrong. So in other words, they got the time frame right for Trump, but they meant more like the last 3 months, I think it was, for Obama, as opposed to his entire presidency.
Yeah, in a span of about under 2 years, he did more than Barack Obama did in a week.
It would be the equivalent of someone saying to me, you only weigh 50 pounds. And I would say, no, that's not. It's demonstrably untrue. I can get on the scale. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I was mistaken. I was right about the number. I just meant that you only weighed 50 pounds when you were 4. That's what I meant. That's what I meant when I said that.
Yeah, just for clarification. And also you'd have to say it with a lot of attitude.
Right.
Like, oh, no, I meant 50 pounds when you were 4.
But
If you
everyone
really
should
wanna
rest
nitpick.
assured, Rob Burnett has cleared up the entire thing about the tape, so the tape doesn't exist. Just the idea, like, this is like what we talk about now is just...
I want to hear that phone call. Rob, how are you? Well,
Mr.
Donald,
President,
Mr. President, I'm terrific.
want to assure you did not use the N-word that we recorded in
we
any
like
way.
that. We like that because that's a very
love
bad
that.
word.
We love that.
We don't use those words.
We do love that. I didn't
love that word.
Don't love that word, and I wouldn't love to hear that I used that word. Anyways,
however, now, look.
Black people ruined Apprentice, right?
I
Rob?
also, I mean, this is just sort of, and this maybe gets to Matt Lewis's piece. We're going to read it a little bit later, but I will say that I never take this guy's word for anything either. But Penn Jillette says that Trump, there are Trump apprentice tapes, and he says, I was in the room, and I heard stuff, and it made me uncomfortable.
Thanks for the timing, dude.
Yeah.
Thank
well
you.
done. Well done.
And this comes from a guy whose TV show was named after a bad word. So he
That's
knows
right.
something about that.
That's right.
What's that?
Yeah.
Penn and Teller BS.
The BS.
Oh,
Debunkers.
yuck.
So, folks, particularly when something like the Alex Jones, gets bumped from platforms
The
or
Alex Jones.
the Alex Jones, those type of things, I always head to the New Yorker to see what their take is. Steve Cole has a great comment piece in the Talk of the Town about Alex Jones, the First Amendment, the digital public square. Then, of course, when I'm there, I fall into a wormhole and I read about just enough. I don't like to read reviews before I see a movie, but they've got a review about Black Klansman. I'm going to pick that out. And then I was like, oh, how Charles de Gaulle rescued France. Okay, I'll read about that. And then I went over to the politics section, and Bill Browder, who the whole Maginski Act came out of Bill Browder. His Maginski was his lawyer who was killed, et cetera, et cetera. That is why you subscribe to the New Yorker magazine. It's an iconic magazine that represents legitimately the best writing in America today. You can inform yourself about most current events and get insight from the New Yorker's writers. You find super entertaining content like Shouts and Murmurs, the weekly humor, satire. I mentioned all the reviews you read, poetry and literature. I got to cop to the fact that I don't read much of the poetry. I just don't get it. I don't get poetry.
You never got poetry?
I never, ever got it. I liked it for a little bit, like when it felt like it was a puzzle. But then I realized, like, it's not why you read poetry.
I felt like it.
Honestly, like, oh, what is
when
this?
I thought Lorca was a crossword, I liked it.
No,
But now it's boring.
with poetry, for me, it was always like, oh, what's this in reference to? Huh? Why? Like I'm always trying to put it into some type of equation.
Like QAnon.
Right, exactly. Exactly. I'm a real romantic, folks. You get cartoon caption contest. I've never engaged in that, but I've always thought that I could, and then I'm like, forget it. But you can access the complete archive, which is super awesome. You get digital replicas of every issue of the print magazine from 1925. We're going back now almost 100 years with your subscription. Don't wait. Go to www, that is for the World Wide Web for your youngins, .newyorker.com/majority. Receive 12 issues for $12 plus a free tote bag. And then if you enter my code majority, you will unlock an additional 50% off your subscription. That is 12 issues for $6. And you get to keep the tote bag. Subscribe to The New Yorker. Read something that means something. That is 12 issues for $6 and a free tote bag. A free tote bag. Go to newyorker.com/majority. enter my code majority at checkout. Do it now. Now. Seriously.
And not for nothing, the New Yorker is now a union shop. So
boom.
There you go.
Boom. And they're supporting this program. I appreciate that. We have a lot of New Yorker writers on here. And because they write the best stuff. No, I don't want to say the best. I don't want to get anybody upset.
The best,
some of the best stuff.
The best stuff.
Some of the best
New Yorker's
stuff.
The best.
All right. Let's go through the primary results last night. Good stuff if you are a progressive and if you are someone who wants to see more diversity in our government. At the very least, there are folks in the running let's start in Vermont. Christine Hallquist could become the nation's first transgender governor. It's going to be tough. There's an incumbent, Phil Scott. And this is interesting. John from San Antonio used to call this program, still does. But John from San Antonio used to call this program and was always very upset that we would not articulate the taxes that were required for a single-payer system. You will recall that under the Affordable Care Act, states could have waivers where they could basically try different things. In Vermont, the plan was to try a single-payer system. And I think it was Schulman. Was that his name? The governor.
Schulman, yeah.
I think
it was Peter Schulman.
Peter Schulman. Peter Schulman ran for, the plan was to roll it out. Now, I'm going to get the dates wrong because I can't remember exactly when it was, but I feel like the plan was to roll it out in 2013. And in 2012, I think he was reelected. His numbers were soft, and he basically got intimidated by the raise in taxes that would have to happen. Now, we know, and it's much tougher on a state than it is nationally to make these numbers work. That's just the reality of it. And we know, though, that the idea is your taxes are going to go up, but your net expenses are going to go down. So in the end, who cares whether you're paying it to the government or to private industry? The act of paying, except for the fact that when you pay it to the government, it's far more efficient. You get a product that's not burdened by having to provide profit for somebody. Nobody needs to go and buy a new Lamborghini or a new yacht with the money that you're paying for health insurance. And it's universal. So you can look around your society and feel like, oh, that's nice. I don't see people dying for lack of health care coverage. And however, that experience of the sticker shock involved in this, and John from San Antonio used to call us and like, there needs to be groundwork that is laid for this, and it's not being laid. People need to understand the dynamic. And he was right. And Bernie, to a large extent, has done that or started that ball rolling. You can see just even recently that report that was put out by the Libertarian think tank that was supposedly going to show why single-payer health care, a Medicare for all plan, would not work because, and I know single-payer health care, it's a catch-all phrase, but just give me a break. Why it would not work, because it would be so expensive over a 10-year period of time. And in their own document, they said, but actually, the cost to the nation is actually even $2 trillion greater than it would be to the federal government under a single-payer program. And the difference between the nation and government is that the nation includes all of our private expenditures. Not to mention, just if you're really interested in these type of things, the productivity that is expended every time you sit down to try and figure out your health insurance and get into an argument with your insurance company about stuff. So anyways, in the wake of that, Phil Scott was elected. And I think he's a fairly popular incumbent Republican governor up in Vermont. So it remains to be seen. But that's a very extended way of saying, like, the opportunity, that we would have a major party nominate a transgender woman or person in this, woman in this case, but just person, is an important step forward for not just the rights of transgender people, but the lives of transgender people, where there are models out there, and the more transgender folk become, just, at one point we're going to drop that term, and then there'll be, acceptance, and there wouldn't have to be the sort of, a lot of transgender folks have to live in fear because of either discrimination or just sheer violence. So it's an important step. And it would be great if she won. We'll see.
And it's not just improving their lives in terms of seeing themselves represented in office, right? Like, she's actually a progressive. And this is what Bernie Sanders was talking about when he said, it's important, but it's not enough to have, 50% women or whatever. We need to have both, because most trans people are also working class people, because most people are working class people.
Right, exactly. And the same thing could be said for Ilhan Omar, who is a Somali American. She won her primary, also a progressive. So we could have two. And I believe Tlaib is also progressive.
She's a member of DSA.
Yeah.
Rashida Tlaib is a member of DSA.
So we could have two, and it looks, 90% chance we're going to have two Muslim women in the House of Representatives, and again, two very progressive ones. The WFP endorsed Johanna Hayes, defeated the establishment candidate in Connecticut. She was a 2016 National Teacher of the Year. In going back to Minnesota, we all heard the story. There was, there was a couple pieces by Rachel Cohen, I think it was, in the Intercept on Attorney General Lori Swanson, who apparently not exactly a good government, not exactly a good example of good government. Pretty right wing as well, but she was primed to win this. And the Intercept broke a couple of stories about how she was basically, tyrannical in a couple of different ways, but was forcing government workers to work on her campaign. Tim Walz won the general election. Walz, not necessarily as progressive as I think Erin Murphy, as far as I recall, but and I am a little suspect about him, broadly speaking, but better him than Lori Swanson. Tim Pawlenty goes down. That is a prime example of the Republican Party being Donald Trump's party, even in Minnesota.
Right. That's why. I think he called Trump unhinged, and he had obviously a fun. In 2016, he called him that. And
apparently,
he had a
Pawlenty
fundraising advantage, name recognition advantage.
Never got the notice that there is no tape, according to Rob Burnett, of the president saying the N-word. Ellison.
No tape.
Ellison won big for Attorney General. A couple of things about this. The Attorney General position, particularly in 2018, is going to be a huge position, particularly in California and in New York. But states around the country are going to end up, they're going to band together, and they're going to sue the federal government. They're going to protect environmental protections. They're going to sue different agencies to make sure that they're doing their job. Not just because of Trump, but also because of total Republican control. This is good because Keith Ellison is going to go in. If he gets into the office, he's going to be very aggressive. not all peaches and cream. There is been an ongoing question and accusation by an ex-girlfriend that Ellison was abusive. There's been a promise of video proof. That video proof is not materialized.
Well, she said explicitly she's not going to release it.
Well, now.
Yeah.
Originally, she was.
Right.
And I don't know why you say I have video proof and then I'm not going to release it.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. That's like, I don't know. It's like telling somebody like, oh, Michael, I have a secret about you, but I'm not going to tell.
Right.
But
seriously, please don't.
I'm going to. I was just saying I was not going to.
Sorry, it was an inappropriate time for a joke. Okay, go ahead.
This is disturbing, right? Because you don't know. To the extent that she's released some texts, it maybe suggests that he's not necessarily someone you want to recommend to a friend to date because he's not particularly nice. But that is different from abuse. And so, I honestly, I don't know. I would probably need a little more evidence in Minnesota, frankly, if I was, to do anything other than vote for him. But it is pretty problematic.
I feel exactly the same way. And also Tina Smith beat Richard Painter. So I don't. Yeah, she crushed him.
Well, Tina Smith is
and she's the sitting
senator,
seat.
Right? She took Franken's seat. Franken endorsed her as well. I don't know if
she
you saw that on Twitter.
Decent.
She's a solid progressive.
Yeah,
I mean, I think
so. She seemed the obvious choice in that one. To me.
Yes, and I'm not convinced that things would have been different for Franken if there wasn't someone who could step into that seat. I don't know. Another thing interesting in Wisconsin, Richard Uihlein, big right winger, spent almost $11 million to push a candidate. He was a Marine veteran and a businessman, guy named Nicholson. I don't know what his first name is. Against another Republican, Leah Vukmir. They were trying to run against Tammy Baldwin. $11 million, and Nicholson lost to Vukmir, and it wasn't close at all. Vukmir was backed by the machine in the state, and apparently right-wing talk radio. So Scott Walker will also face a challenge in the fall from Tony Evers, who is the state schools chief.
Do you think that's in play? What's your read on that?
I think it's as good a chance as they've had. I haven't heard necessarily great things about Tony Evers. But,
I've heard bad things. Harvey K. on my show talked about wanting to tear up a check he wrote him, I believe, because of school issues.
It's a missed opportunity, but it is what it is. Randy Bryce in Wisconsin won the 1st district race. He was running against someone who was a pretty solid progressive, but Bryce got out of the door early, and he's a candidate who has a lot of charisma and sort of,
iron mustache.
Has an iron mustache.
I think some of the stories they pulled up about him, I think in some ways play to his benefit, frankly. I think, first of all, some of the things he did going back to the 90s, the fact that he could tell a story about actually, improving his life, I think is relatable to people. And I don't necessarily read the stuff they dredged up on him as necessarily being a negative.
Yep, I agree.
Some of his arrests were at protests to make the world a better place.
The recent ones, that's right. They would list. I liked his challenger. She might have even been the one I'd be inclined to vote for. But when she put out X number of arrests and included in that several things just a list, but
right.
It's actually several of those are disobedience, and then also some. I think one was marijuana, which I think should be legal, obviously, and then the others were you shouldn't drink and drive. That was in the 90s,
Yep.
Yeah, it's like when they try to smear Bernie Sanders for having had so much credit card debt, or even committing a petty crime or two. How out of touch are you with regular people to think that's not going to make them connect with you more?
I mean, there was a time where that would. I mean, there was a time where
Yeah,
it would,
yeah.
but I think you have to be like you have to have a certain amount of tin ear, and you got to operate on the wrong playbook. Another interesting race in Wisconsin, in Milwaukee County. This is the seat that was the former Sheriff Dave Clark, who incidentally was a Democrat. Sheriff Dave Clark ran as a Democrat. He didn't quite project that, but Ernell Lucas has won the nomination, and this is a very big race, at least for that area. And the reason is because Lucas has made a point of not cooperating. The sitting sheriff, who I believe is a Republican, I believe, or the person he's running against is very pro-ICE, like aggressively has been handing over people, ask them if you're born in this country. If they're not, because regardless of their citizenship, hands the name into ICE. Releases people, tells ICE. This guy, Lucas, apparently does not subscribe to that and is, I think, vocally pro-immigrant. So, Ned Lamont won the nomination in Connecticut.
What do you think about that? You have any thoughts on that?
I hope he wins.
Well, of course, because he's a Democrat. But what do you think about him? You have a little bit of a history with him, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's a progressive. He's a bit of a class traitor, which I appreciate. But sometimes it would be nice to. I think he's a good guy, and I think his policies are going to be good, and I think he's competent. I just am mad that he took that vacation and didn't beat Joe Lieberman.
Gotta tell people that story.
Well, it's just he went on vacation after winning the primary, and
he challenges Joe Lieberman. It's a huge upset. It's anti-war, right? Like it's big ramifications for anti-war.
It was not just anti-war. The impetus was people. I mean, this is I've referenced this particularly in the context of Netroots Nation, but the people who would go to Netroots Nation, the people who were on the outside fighting the establishment, had a big problem with Joe Lieberman because he was standing in the way of progressive policies, right? And ultimately he did stand in the way of a much better version of the ACA. And the argument was by the establishment, he's with us on everything except for the war. But the fact is he wasn't. And so the Netroots basically came in and, which was a precursor to the stuff that we see today with Justice Democrats and Our Revolution, and even like the energy of DSA, not necessarily the same exact politics, but the idea of like we're the outsiders and we're going to upset the apple cart. A lot of young people went into Connecticut and got Ned Lamont elected, or I should say, the nomination for the Democratic Party. I also want to say that like he announced on air with me that he was going to run. His unofficial announcement on a Friday. He announced on a Monday. I was filling in for Randy Rhodes, and I said I got to get Lamont on, and he came on. And it turns out he knew a buddy of mine had mowed his lawns when he was a kid. So and then he went on vacation for like a week or 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's
in the middle of summer.
That's pretty maddening.
And it's like, I get it. It's exhausting running for a campaign, but dude, you need you have a finite number of days, right? And you're doing something that so many people have invested so much into this. Like you owe it to them to push it to the limit. And I mean, different people could have different. I could never make the case that that's why he didn't win. But I just feel like if you're given that opportunity by people, you owe it to them to work yourself until you drop. And
that was a major
just
faux pas. And
emotionally,
I get it.
It just, but
But you actually think he is, in fact, a decent guy with some pretty good politics.
Absolutely.
And he might be a good governor for Connecticut, which I think Connecticut is the most unequal state in the country. That might have changed a couple years ago. It was.
That would make
There's
sense.
A lot
That
of stuff
would
to
not
do there.
surprise me.
Right.
that would make
right.
sense. I don't know what to say about this this report out of Pennsylvania in terms of the Catholic priests. I mean, this the state did this investigation. It identified 1,000 children who were victims over the course of 60, 70 years. There were probably thousands more. It was covered 6 of the state's dioceses: Allentown, Erie, Greensburg, Harrisburg, Pittsburgh, and Scranton. I would bet, and there's one example in this story that I have of one person who died of an overdose, but I would bet that if you were to trace a significant number of the overdose opioid deaths in these towns, the crossover, the Venn diagram of these two things would be pretty high. A grand jury reviewed more than 2 million documents, including from the secret archives. This is what church leaders referred to the reports of abuse they hid from the public for decades. This is according to the Attorney General. 1,400-page report include a 7-year-old boy who was sexually abused by a priest and then told him he should go to confession and confess his sins to that same priest. Another boy who was repeatedly raped from the ages of 13 to 15 to the point that it caused severe spine injuries to the boy. And that kid became addicted to painkillers, later died of an overdose. They had one victim in Pittsburgh was forced to pose naked as Christ on the cross while priests photographed him with a Polaroid camera. This is just... Priests gave the boy and others gold cross necklaces to mark them as being groomed for abuse. This is the thing that's just... I mean, it's all enraging. But there may not be any criminal cases from this because of the cover-up. Almost every instance of abuse is too old to be prosecuted. Now, it seems to me to be conceivable that there could be changes in the law in Pennsylvania that might change those statute of limitations. I don't know. I don't know if that's constitutional, but this is just, it's horrific. Really horrific. And, yeah, I don't know what broad lessons you can take from this, but it's just horrific.
One thing I've tried to reconcile with learning about these stories over time is there is no justification for NDAs in a just society, especially in situations like this. I'm trying to justify
and I should be clearer on that. There were non-disclosure agreements for some of these kids. So, in other words, if I'm just making up a scenario here, but a parent finds out and goes to the church and says, we're going to bring charges here. This is crazy. Well, we're going to settle with you. Here's $1 million. Here's $500,000. Here's $100,000. Whatever it is. You will get this compensation. Maybe you're able to move, leave town. The kid can start his life or her life at, in another context. You get therapy. I mean, on and on. but you got to sign a non-disclosure form. You see this, I mean, if people recall the story of the Winchester rifle that was told when I went to, I guess it was two of those tort conferences ago, how non-disclosure played a major role in that horrific tragedy where you had guns that would shoot by themselves. Father ends up testifying against his son for the killing of his other son and sends his son to jail with his testimony saying guns don't fire by themselves. Well, he thought that because Winchester, when they settled with other people, had non-disclosure forms. And so the fact that they had this defect in their gun was never made public. This is the same type of situation, right? Like, there are people out there who were abused by a priest who was in one diocese and just moved to another diocese after having abused kids in the first diocese, and because of a non-disclosure form. I mean, it's criminal.
And it goes back to what I'm always harping on with libertarians, right? Like, if you really care about freedom of speech, you won't want to live in a society where people with more money and power can say whatever they want, and people with no money and power can be silenced.
Right. Except for the way they got around that was money, the expenditure of money became the same as speech. And
silly me. How could I forget?
There you go. All right, let's change gears a little bit. I'm going to take a phone call. I'm going to call into the phone system, and we'll take a phone call during the show. Why not? Folks can get a little sense of what it's like.
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report.
On the fun half, as you
Sam
can see,
will be with you shortly.
How fun this is.
This is it.
This is it. It gets so fun on the fun half.
What did Rush Limbaugh say? What was his thing? Having more fun
than
anybody should be allowed to have.
Something to that.
Only one man should be allowed to have.
Calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Okay, this person is
fun.
210. 210.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Sam. Okay, good afternoon, Sam.
Good afternoon, John, from San Antonio. Okay. I recognized your voice.
Yeah.
I recognized your jazz.
All right, so you listened to a little jazz, and the as a soundtrack for the show. Good. What's on your mind, John?
Yeah, last night was a fantastic night for our Revolution and Justice Democrats in the Democratic primaries in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Vermont. All four candidates I endorsed on Monday won blowout victories. In Minnesota 5th District, Democrat Margaret Anderson Kelleher raised more than $100,000 more than our Revolution, and Justice Democrats endorsed Ilhan Omar, yet Omar won by 18 points. She received over 65,000 votes, and there were over 135,000 total Democratic votes in the district, which is one of the highest vote totals of any district in the nation. I just wish the whole nation could follow the lead of Minnesota's 5th District voters who have the wisdom and commitment to make this country more compassionate, and by electing great progressives like Keith Ellison and Ilhan Omar, who are promoting basic human rights like Medicare for all, $15 an hour minimum wage, and free college. In Wisconsin's 1st District, Kathy Myers was leading in the only poll release, but Bernie Sanders and Justice Democrats endorsed Randy Bryce, who won by 19 points. Bryce is a union iron worker who's great on working class issues, and he'll be a great congressman if he wins against Republican primary winner Brian Stile. Democrats received over 1,000 votes more in the district, and Republicans already have a negative ad attacking Bryce for his arrest record. And everybody makes some mistakes in life. We incarcerate far more people than America, than any other nation, including China, which has over 800 billion people. So I hope the voters of Wisconsin's first are open-minded and realize that the people should vote for people who are going to help working-class people and middle-class people. Also, a great win for Justice Democrats endorsed Christine Hallquist in the governor's race for Vermont. The fact that the Republican Phil Scott is the heavy favorite, in my opinion, shows that people in New England, like in states like Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and even Maryland, where Ben Jealous is still down by 16 points in polling, are still open to Republican economic policy. What's your comments on this? And I want to go back to some overall vote totals in general elections later. If you want to go from there.
What's my comment on what, John? Specifically, the wins?
Well, I mean, you can talk about the wins. I mean, you've already gone over those a lot, and so. But I mean, I want.
It's encouraging, but I'll tell you something. I think like if you look broadly, okay, people are going into the polling booths and they're voting for women, and in rates that we haven't seen in the past, and if that woman is a progressive or a DSA member or whatnot, it's even better. But people are going in and they are voting. They're voting for people who haven't been, in a position to win in the past, or maybe not, folks who hadn't run. I mean, I think that is the sort of broad lesson as you look across the spectrum. I mean, that is...
And Republicans are really settling into pure, unadulterated white identity politics, and Democrats are definitely starting to configure, at least on the identity stuff,
absolutely,
moving in a future-oriented direction. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's, the sorting continues. Let's put it that way. And it's getting, I don't want to say polarized, but polarized more in a good way. I'm happy about it. I don't want to say polarized only because some people make it seem like that's a bad thing. No, it's a good thing. If one end of the spectrum is moving towards white supremacy, then I think it's a good thing we're polarized. That's my sense.
Definitely. I mean, because women are already so much more democratic, and so just the fact that they're leading a surge in voting is going to help all Democrats, and that in time will also help more progressives, because even though even centrist Democrats are going to feel the pressure to move to the left, and that's already been happening quite a bit, and so I mean you have like when Mike from PA was talking about, when I was talking about California a few months ago, he was saying that maybe I should be talking about PCCC and move on candidates, and those are great candidates also, and I support those candidates like Katie Porter in the 45th district of California, or Katie Hill in the 25th district of California. I mean, they may not be, hardcore, but I mean, they're still moving toward the left. A lot of them support Medicare for all, and they know where people are headed. Especially millennial voters, and as they vote more often, like the people in the 30s, they're more registered voters than just about. Right now than just about any other age group, and so I mean it's just great to see. But what I was referring to was the fact that you grew up in Massachusetts, and to see all of these governors who are expected to win races, Republican governors. You don't think that that's because of more cultural issues? Do you think that that's just because
I think that
moderate?
Yeah. I think they're more moderate, and I think the governors. I think at least in these states, you're not looking at Charlie Baker is not making Massachusetts a right to work state.
Did you see what he just signed for voting rights?
What's it? He expanded it. Yeah, automatic
he just significantly
voter,
expanded.
Yeah.
Now, I wouldn't vote for Charlie Baker, and he is a corporatist, but legit. And also, the reason the governor of Vermont's popularity has dipped, in a very blue state right now, is because he signed some type of toughened gun legislation. So it really is a different type of ball game up there with those governors.
Yes, it's highly localized. I think. I really do think that's what it is. So.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to talk about the great turnout. Also, I mean, it's really good to see guys like Scott Walker. I mean, I can't wait till that guy goes down. I mean, I saw Ryan go down, retire in April, and it's going to be one of the best moments of the night on the 6th to see Scott Walker lose his race, after all the anti-working class issues that he deals with, and his, how he worships the Koch brothers. To have him lose will just be fantastic. And also in Minnesota,
I had a thing where I had a breakdown of numbers, and I can't seem to find it.
I'm sorry, but that sounds like a very strong prediction. Walker's out, John?
Oh yeah, I just feel he's
You hear the
gone.
swag in that? I love it.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Oh yeah.
Well,
He's out.
I mean, Walker might be out, but I will say this: that the number of Democrats who voted across the board in each of these states, even in Connecticut, was significantly larger than Republicans. I had a breakdown against these numbers, and I can't find it right now. But really impressive.
I got to admit, I'm taking a lot out of the strength of the confidence of that Walker prediction. If I was to personalize these results, he would probably be the one that I would. I mean, I want all Republicans to be destroyed, obviously, but it would be beautiful to see Scott Walker finally lose.
John, I hope you're right. Appreciate the
Quick
call,
question,
buddy.
John. Do you have a Twitter handle? Are you on twitter.com?
Yeah. I don't do too much on it. It's mostly, but I mean, I've been retweeting a lot of stuff by this guy Warren Gunnels, Bernie's main policy guy. Yeah. Let me see. Let me see if I can remember it.
The
Raucous
people want to know.
Dendrite.
Sorry, what?
Yeah. Raucous Dendrite at Cacophonous Minuti.
Okay.
What?
All right. John, I'll tell you what. Send me an email.
I think
all
we're
right?
going to need
Send
an
me
email on
with a
that
link.
handle.
Appreciate the call. Appreciate the call.
John is a wizard.
Right. We're gonna, we are woefully behind in our setting up our website stuff, but we're getting on it, and we're gonna have like a little section for like a friends of the show type of thing like that. So
every little detail I learn about John outside of the
like an
wonky
onion.
stuff is just mind blowing.
he's like an onion. You peel it, and it's just unbelievable. All right, let's play this one clip because this I find. This is a clip number 3. And there is a zombie lie that should have been completely destroyed by what happened in Kansas, frankly. I mean, there's a lot of other places where it could be destroyed, but it is... this zombie lie will not die. And that is that the Laffer curve is real and that if you cut taxes, you will increase revenues. Now, it's quite possible that revenues can rise even though you've cut taxes, but that is different. That is a coincidence as opposed to a causal connection. Here is...
Liz Peek is her name.
Yeah, Liz Peek, longtime right-wing talker, former Wall Street executive on Fox News, pushing this lie.
The big lesson from what has gone on this year is that individual tax revenues are up. That's a big surprise because Democrats have said, oh, you're going to cut taxes. It's going to blow the deficit through the roof. What happens every single time, it happened when Reagan cut taxes, when JFK cut taxes, basically tax revenues go up. It's sort of counterintuitive, but basically the income level grows, and we've seen that this year. Income is now up 6% or so. And as a result, income tax revenues also grow.
Okay. First off, in terms of Reagan, Ronald Reagan raised other taxes that increased revenue. Social Security taxes went up during Ronald Reagan, increased revenue. Secondly, the economy has been expanding for years. in the wake of the Great Recession. It's been doing it slower than we want, starting to pick up more steam. It was doing this in the last year of Obama's year. You can see the graphs. There is no sharp increase up. It is basically following the exact same trajectory. So the economy is expanding. Tax revenues were getting larger anyways. If you want to do an experiment to see what happens when you slash taxes, corporate taxes, when you do basically what the Trump administration did, you can go to Kansas and see where they don't have the ability to borrow money. And yes, our deficit has exploded. Do I think that's a problem? Not necessarily, no. I think we wasted the money, though, on giving millionaires and billionaires tax breaks, and they're not going to, it's simply not as efficient as actually giving that money to the rest of us. But if you want to see what happens when the government doesn't have the ability to deficit spend, which is basically what they did for these tax cuts, then go into a time machine, travel 4 years ago, and look at what happened to Kansas. Sam Brownback came in, did almost the exact same tax plan that Donald Trump did on a national level, and it almost destroyed Kansas. Destroyed their education system. It was so bad that the Republican legislature re-raised the taxes. So if that counterintuitive myth that she was talking about was true, we would be looking at Kansas and going, wow, what a success story, instead of like, wow, what a disaster. Sam Brownback would be running for governor again, or would be running for presidency because of his success, the Kansas miracle. Instead, he is literally the ambassador to the ether. He was appointed,
occasionally emerges to try to get fascists out of jail.
Right. He was named ambassador to religion. They keep him in a hovercraft, and he just hovers over the earth and just goes to religion wherever it finds itself.
Yeah, you're an ambassador to the religion. Mark Barnett.
They put this guy, it's the equivalent of sending him to Siberia, because he is a walking reminder that this theory that if you cut taxes, revenue will increase is bunk. It's bunk. We are deficit spending. Every time you increase the debt, the public debt, you increase private equity. And so two things can happen that not be related. I brushed my teeth today and it rained somewhere. That's a coincidence. That is not, my brushing my teeth does not cause it to rain. But that is
it rains so infrequently.
Right. That is.
That was a very Seder style joke, actually.
That was good. That was good. It was a Seder style joke. So hopefully that myth will die. But the failure of the Democrats to make more of what took place in Kansas, I think is going to come back to haunt them. There should have been far more talk about that.
Or in the whole country over the course of the 80s, right?
I mean, in the 80s, the fact is that Ronald Reagan increased taxes in other areas, so revenues didn't drop, and we have the ability to deficit spend. So, you don't necessarily have to do the draconian cuts that they did in Kansas, because we can borrow the money. All right, we're going to take a break, head into the fun half. Folks, a reminder, the show relies on folks like you for its support. You can become a member by going to jointhemajorityreport.com, jointhemajorityreport.com. There you'll have the opportunity to support this show. You can either do a one-off donation there, or you can take the option of less than 50 cents a day, bringing this program to your listening device or viewing device every day. JoinTheMajorityReport.com. Also, don't forget JustCoffee.coop. Fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code Majority. Get 10% off. Also, we've had people who are looking for the BetterHelp code. We're going to start putting that BetterHelp.com/majority in the podcast description with the link, so that you can get there. BetterHelp.com/majority. And last night was Tuesday night. Tuesday night, Sans super producer Matt Leck. How did it go?
Substitute super producer Brendan Finn crushed it. He did a great job. Thanks, man.
Sub soup?
Sub soup.
Yeah.
I think you did a very good job. There was a need after the show, without putting too much out there, to on David Grishkam's end to get some help from Leck on something, and Leck is clearly enjoying his vacation, which we're all happy to hear. Trevor Ball, you and I had a really the Ben Shapiro Hot Lizard Girl character was in full effect, and that was very fun.
That's good.
And the commentary, the cold open of Paul Robeson talking about colonialism and explaining the idea of why the idea of the West is a fiction. It's an interesting show for patrons this weekend. Saudi strategy in the age of Trump, and of course Woke Bros. But thanks, Brendan. Patreon.com/TMBS, guys.
What's up with the Antifada, Jamie?
Well, I'm so glad you asked. We have a new episode dropping probably by the end of the show today. So once you're finished listening to MR, you can go right on to the Antifada. We have a very special guest named Comrade Communicator of the Intergalactic Workers League. And he kind of goes back and forth between him and our producer, Andy. And they kind of outline both an orthodox history of Posadism and the role of this guy, Jay Posadis, in actual mainstream Trotskyist movements. He was actually the head of all Trotskyists in Latin America for a while, which is a pretty impressive post. And then Comrade Communicator goes over the more, let's say, wacky things about Posadism, which really seem to be resonating with people today, and actually makes a pretty convincing case for why it's a thing in our culture right now.
Alrighty.
And Posadism being, I'm sorry, I must define it. The idea that space comrades are going to come down and give us full communism. There's more to it than that. There's dolphins, there's water birth, but
right, of course.
Just check it out.
Of course there is. Of course there's dolphins and water birth. Well, it's not a literary hangover you can check out if you're missing your
It's giving you a little Matt impression.
Your Matt fix.
Oh my God, North Dakota, dude, weed and Hawthorne.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. Head into the fun half. We'll be right back after this. 646-257-3920 is the number. We are back. Sam Seder. It is the fun half, ladies and gentlemen. The fun half, wherein we have fun and we have half. Right? Both?
That's how you sold me on the show.
That was the way I sold you, yes.
Yeah.
The marketing genius of calling it the fun half and explaining it in that fashion.
Are we having fun yet?
It is. There's so much fun to be had. It's crazy. All right, let's go. Let's go to the phones for a quick one, and then we'll call from an 808 area code. Who is this? Where are you calling from?
Oh, hey guys. This is Sebastian, the Marxist Leninist Cedars, calling from Hawaii. And
okay,
is this me?
Yes, it is you.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So, just a quick update from my previous call when Michael was sitting in your seat.
Ooh. Okay.
So we all know that Kanyala Ng definitely lost the seat by quite a big margin, and this was to Ed Case and a whole bunch of other shitty lobbyist types. And the thing is with Ed Case, though, he joined the race about 2 months ago, right at the deadline. Didn't see anyone from his campaign on the ground, no signs. All he had was just some campaign ads on TV, and somehow he was able to eke out a convincing victory. So and then also, in addition to that, I'm kind of nervous. I'm kind of starstruck right now talking to the chairman.
Really? Jesus. The chairman.
Yeah,
I've never heard that before.
Yeah,
I like it.
Yeah. For example, this year, the voter participation is slightly up, but just barely above 2016. So I think
but wait a second. Wait a second.
Yeah.
When voting participation is just up over 2016, that's really good. Because this is an off-year election. So you're comparing apples to oranges. Or really what you're doing is you're comparing apples to limes. Limes are usually just always smaller than apples. But in this instance, we're finding the limes to be almost the size of apples. That's pretty good. That's a lot of lime juice to carry this metaphor too far.
Well, I mean, it just kind of sucks ass that in a state where we're impacted by, rising rent costs, epidemic levels of homelessness, and the fact that we're going to lose a lot of our resorts due to climate change, that they voted for, pretty shitty guy.
Yeah.
Versus, the message that Kanyala Ng was bringing forth. So, I guess I'm kind of accelerationist now, too. You could throw that into the hyphenated name.
Oh, no. Don't make Ed Case make you an accelerationist, buddy. He is trash, though. I was... Why did that happen? Ed Case, particularly, this was not a Gretchen... I forgot her name. But the woman who won over Syed in Michigan. Okay. She's decent.
Right.
Right? Not the best choice, but
Right.
she's decent. Ed Case is a right-wing blue dog Iraq war invasion, luxury hotel guy who seems even far to the right for what, Hawaii. Didn't Bernie Sanders win his Hawaiian primary by some massive double-digit margin? I was kind of surprised by that.
It was a landslide in that case, but
didn't Ng kind of get in trouble for, campaign finance?
Ng had campaign finance issues at the end, which they dropped on him. And obviously, I really supported Ng, but I'm even thinking it was a wide open field, and I'm kind of surprised that Ed Case, of all people, was maybe it's just name recognition. Maybe that's what it is.
Well, hang in there.
Yeah, it was definitely that. Okay, so another point, I guess it's directed towards Jamie, Comrade Jamie. So, I mean, you often make the distinction that you are a libertarian socialist or an anarcho-communist, but what exactly is the defining line between authoritarian and libertarian, especially if you take in the context of bloody revolution?
Well, I mean, you have a point. Like, I forget who said this. Maybe it was Coburn. There's nothing more authoritarian than a revolution, right? Because it's the...
Well, Engels does that.
It was Engels? All right. Good.
I think so.
Well, I will Google that in a minute. But yeah, like it's a violent overthrow of the capitalist class by the working class. Or it doesn't have to be violent, but usually there is some, not necessarily right at the beginning, but certainly when the ruling class tries to come back. Yeah, I think it is a false flag in some ways because, right, not all domination is created equal. And it is a tension that I don't think anyone has yet resolved, right? Like, you need to have a state that is strong enough and complex enough so that you can, like, coordinate big projects and it doesn't get taken over by tyrants. But if it's too bureaucratic and too powerful, you also run the risk of getting taken over by tyrants, like we saw in, for example, the Soviet Union. So, yeah, I haven't fully resolved this question because nobody has, but I do have sort of an instinctual distrust of people who claim power for themselves.
Appreciate the call, I say, as chairman. Thank you. Good day. Good job. I like that call. Thank you. So Bernie Sanders was on Stephen Colbert last night, and I don't know. This tape's usually around 6. They probably didn't know the results of this election, which were far better from a primary standpoint, from a progressive standpoint, than the week before. And so there's a lot of different factors at play here. Nobody, I mean, I have not been someone who thought that you were going to have this sweep of suddenly every candidate is going to be DSA candidate across the country. It's not, nothing happens that way. So here is a Bernie on Colbert's show. Colbert, as far as I know, in my experience, limited experience with him personally, is a pretty liberal guy. But here is an interesting line of questioning that I think in some ways, and this is an entertainment show, but it does sort of miss the point.
And both of you identify as democratic socialists. What does that mean?
Well, I think it means, among other things, that if you work 40 hours a week in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, you should be earning a living wage $15 an hour. That's what it means. It means, Stephen, it means that we end the international disgrace of the United States being the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people as a right, while we end up spending twice as much per capita on health care as any other major nation. It means that we understand that the future of this country are our young people, and that it is insane that hundreds of thousands of bright young kids cannot afford to go to college because of the income of their families, and many others are leaving school deeply in debt, and we're going to make public colleges and universities tuition free. And it means that as global citizens, people who understand that we have a moral obligation to leave a healthy planet to our children and grandchildren, we're going to stand up to Trump, and we're going to transform our energy system in this country away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energies. That's what it means.
Okay. So other people Other people have espoused those ideas without calling themselves socialists. Ever since the New Deal, and certainly since the Great Society, the Democratic Party has been associated with the social safety net and essentially been socialism curious. But why do you need to call yourself socialist? Because that's freighted with so much negativity in the United States.
I'll tell you why.
Okay, I'm just saying that, like, people are very excited about Ocasio-Cortez. I've had her in the seat. She's very impressive. But the people that she campaigned for did not win their primaries. Only half the people you campaigned for.
All right, let's just stop here, and we'll go a little further in a minute. But first off, And of course, this was before the results of yesterday, where the majority of the people I think that they campaigned for won. You can't. Neither one is indicative of what the trajectory of these of these policies and this whole project is going to be. But it is not the case. First off, demonstrably, it is just not the case anymore that socialism has the negative connotations that Colbert thinks it does. And I understand why he thinks that, because he's my age, if not a year or two older, and we grew up with the predominant rhetoric being that the Soviet Union was the evil empire. And they were the evil empire because of communism and its twin little sister, I guess not twin, but it's Irish twin sister, socialism. And these things were, even when we had Bernie on in 2004, 2005, we would have him on the show. And it was a weird thing to have a socialist on. It just simply was. In national media, I'm quite convinced that we were probably the first national media that he did in any consistent way.
You know, the only guy I ever saw call himself a socialist on TV, say in like 2011, I think it was, besides I guess Bernie Sanders when they occasionally let him on, was Lawrence O'Donnell.
Lawrence O'Donnell, Democratic socialist.
Basically.
Yes,
yeah.
Called himself that. I remember that actually. But in the aughts, in the 90s, the 80s, you did not hear anybody refer to themselves in that way. And in fact, by the time you get into the 90s, people were afraid to call themselves liberal, not because they were associated with centrism, not because they were associated with identity politics or economic policies that were so closely hewn to the market, but for the opposite reason. And it's just the language has changed.
Big government is over.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Mike Dukakis lost because he couldn't justify liberalism from the left. I mean, from the right. He couldn't. He had never had to run. It was never a question. Massachusetts is a very liberal state. I mean that in like the specific use of the word. And so you look at the polling that just came out yesterday. I'm surprised. Democrats and leaners, positive view of capitalism, 47% in 2018. Positive view of socialism, 57%. In 2016, it was 58%. They just had a 56% positive view of capitalism. So 2012, it was 55 positive of capitalism, 53 positive of socialism. Now, Republicans, not so much. Not so much. But I would imagine independence is trending upwards. And certainly we know that under the age of 40, socialism handily beats capitalism as just whatever it means. It just, we're talking about messaging here on Colbert. And then there's another really important thing that people aren't contemplating, which is the idea now that liberals are considered centrists and moderates.
Overturn
And
window.
15 years ago, to say you're a liberal was to be marginalized because you're too far left. And now to say you're a liberal means you are too to the right, or too moderate, or you're moderate, or you're centrist, or whatever it is. And I don't, the Overton window sometimes I think gets overused. But this is an example of how you move policies toward the desired goals. I mean, and it's embedded in the question. There have been Democrats who have proposed all of these things, and they're all raising the minimum wage $15 an hour is not a socialist.
No.
I mean, it's decidedly not, right? It's decidedly not socialism.
Federal job guarantee is.
Federal job guarantee is arguably. There are other elements of it, but these are policies that have all been proposed by Democrats in the past who did not identify themselves as socialists. But it's working. And that's why you do it. That's the answer. It's working.
It's working, and it's very exciting.
It's very exciting. Let's listen to Colbert just a little bit more.
Won their primaries so far, so maybe there's a little taint to socialism that turns people off.
I don't really think so. I think the real issue is that the ideas that we have been talking about, almost without exception, Stephen, are now ideas that are mainstream ideas that are supported by the vast majority of the American people. And I think also people in their gut understand that we're living in a really strange moment in American history above and beyond Donald Trump, which is very strange.
What?
Yeah, I mean, that's good. But that's the bottom line. It's just like it's, and maybe, Bernie's not in a position to say that it's working, but it's working. It's working. I mean, demonstrably, the idea that you could have the outliers are the Democrats who are not campaigning on the vast majority of these proposals. And to the ones that aren't campaigning on it, they are certainly trying to hedge when they get asked the question. Nobody's coming out and saying, I am vociferously against Medicare for all. No,
right.
That is, no one's saying that. And that certainly would have been used as a bludgeon 5-10 years ago.
And you know what, Stephen? If it doesn't work, we'll do the Gaddafi option.
And but I think the question that I have with this, and I'm working on an answer for it, but this keeps coming up in these late night shows where it's like, why do you have to call yourself a socialist? Is it the fear that they're going to be drawing away from regular mainstream Democrats and that's going to ultimately hurt some sort of opposition chance?
There's just
in the fall?
I think, frankly, to be honest with you, and I'm not, the reason why you hear that in late night audiences is just because the age of the host and the era in which they grew up, and they have not looked at the data, and they're just, for them,
it's just instinct.
I think it's just like for them, like socialism was a dirty word in some ways. And so when they hear it now, they're like, because I think Colbert subscribes to all of those policies. I don't doubt it for a moment. And I think he thinks he's on it in terms of a messaging thing, and I think he's just a little bit behind the curve.
I have those conversations too.
And you have to be behind the curve to host a show, a late night show on CBS. On some level, you have to be behind some curves, right? Or otherwise, you'd be on YouTube.
Or they're obsessed with labels, like our caller the other day, who just kept saying he's not even a Democrat. But
well, I think it's not so much obsessed with labels as much as it is from my perspective, as much as it is like they think it's a messaging problem.
Well, they're wrong. But I was going to say these things do come in waves. Like the Phil Oakes song from the 60s was very critical of liberals. People were critical of liberals in early 1900s Russia as well. And it seems like there is now a new rising current of left populist energy in this country. And it's really good. Also, I think part of the disconnect comes where people don't know how to measure politics any other way than election results, whereas the truth is that it's way more complicated than that. It's the tip of the iceberg, right? Like, it's been 10 years since Occupy Wall Street. It's been 2 years since this left populist sentiment really made its way into the electoral sphere in any major way at all, right?
7 years since Occupy, right?
7, right. Since I was thinking of the crash. Anyway, it's been 2 years since this left populist sentiment became a major factor in the electoral sphere this time around. So, like, we're going to lose most of the time still. And there are a lot of factors working against it. And the fact that we are seeing the victories that we have seen so far is amazing.
Yep. I think that's true. You know what sucks, folks? Sometimes parents just don't get it. Sometimes your parents just don't get it. Am I right? I know. I have kids. I realize I'm not hip and with it. We all have been through this experience where you're giving you're doing like your white supremacist live stream, and then your dad just tells you to stop being such a Nazi. Here is Jason Kessler sitting at home. He's living at his parents' place because of lawsuits against him, and it sounds like he doesn't have the cash to get out and get a real job, or I don't know what's going on with him, but he does have an iPhone though, and he is he's doing a live stream. Where was he doing this live stream?
Somewhere in his parents' house. I don't know where they live.
No, but I mean, what technology was it? Was this like a Twitter
like a
or
Google
YouTube?
Hangout. It looks like a FaceTime.
Yeah, FaceTime live stream, and here he is, and this, and then his dad tells him to stop doing it.
Orthodox crosses on their chest, as Dr. Duke likes to point out, is Jewish. The breaking houses are in Israel.
Hey, you get out of my room!
Hey, sorry, I'm having an issue here.
Oh, you got a drunk roommate there?
Something like that.
Push me like that in my room.
I've got somebody who supports Orthodox Israeli, we're at a crosshairs on that stuff. I don't agree with. There's.
My room, Jason. This is my room.
Hold on a second.
Clean your room. I'm going to assume that's a parent there. I'm not sure. Jason, why are you staying with... You're not staying with an Orthodox Jew, are you?
No, it's my father. Basically, the deal is my family watches American History Channel.
Oh, God.
24/7, and it's constant anti-German propaganda. The Nazis, the Jews, and the dude. I'm stuck in a situation where I have to stay with my family because I'm paying for all these lawsuits, and I can't afford to do that without staying with my family. But they're cut.
Life has been pretty expensive the last few months. I still maintain an apartment and this boat in case of eviction, and I trust Shlomo to figure out a way to get me evicted. But if I get in a situation where I can't have an apartment like you're in, I've got this bad boy. Now, I've been sorting out documents and stuff, but this is my baby. In the back there is a king-size bed. In the front there's a double. Behind door number 2 there, and this table comes down and becomes a king-size bed. I'm sorry, a twin bed. So I've got hot water.
Why don't you invite your damn friend to stay there, right? Your little Nazi friend to stay there, because Shlomo's coming.
Actually, that's amazing. That's so awesome. He's just like, oh yeah, you're with your parents. That sucks. Oh, you want to see my houseboat?
Exactly.
That you're not invited to
anymore. Let's see. Yeah. Look, let me tell you how much room I've got here. I've got so many beds.
A shower. This is my toy from when I used to make good money. And I will be renting it out and stuff to try and cover expenses, or else I'll have to sell it at a huge loss. Fund my company, give me some revenue. My coffers are running pretty low since the election.
Yeah.
I also love the History Channel.
Right.
That bastion of left
the
thought.
Nazis, the Jews.
He's literally like, my dad just watches a bunch of MacArthur documentaries where they're like, the Germans had another plan, but MacArthur had another idea, see? And
How
that's like
awesome.
his equivalent of like, he's
Where do
just
we- where do
History
we-
Channel made my
You know
dad
what they
gay.
say? History is written by the people who got genocided.
Yeah, of course. Where do we send the trophy to Kessler's dad?
We'll have to find that out.
That is, man, so humiliating.
But actually, what a patient, loving guy.
The dad?
That was your son. I'd say, dude, be homeless.
Well,
get frostbite.
Maybe
try to crash.
Maybe
on the
a little too patient and a little too loving.
Right.
The idea of enabling,
Right.
maybe you should just say, son, not only get out of my room, but don't use my internet to.
Right.
But maybe dad doesn't care. I don't know. It sounds like he
cucked
does a
him.
little bit.
No, he cares. At the very least, he's embarrassed by what a disgusting little jackass his son is.
That's good. That's important. Speaking of jackasses, Stephen Cohen. Well, this is from Fox and Friends, and Marsha Blackburn was on. Right? Correct. Stephen Cohen. He is a Democratic congressman from Tennessee, and and Blackburn is running against Governor Phil Bredesen, right? And Bredesen is running again. He was governor in the past. He's running again. Cohen obviously is, I don't know if he's a surrogate, an official surrogate for him, but definitely supportive. And here is Marsha Blackburn just absolutely beside herself on with Ainsley, what's her name?
Earhart.
Ainsley Earhart. Just absolutely beside herself because of how rude Stephen Cohen was.
Democratic Congressman Steve Cohen making some very disturbing comments about fellow lawmaker Marsha Blackburn jumping off of a bridge. Listen.
The big orange president, he's going to come down here and he's going to endorse Marsha Blackburn. Because Marsha Blackburn, if he says jump off the Harahan Bridge, she'll jump off the Harahan Bridge. I wish he'd say that.
Here to respond now is Tennessee Congressman Marsha Blackburn. Thank you so much for being with us, Congressman.
Sure. Good morning.
Good morning. What
Pause it. This is the first question out of her mouth. How excited were you to find something that was so easy for you to feel completely, completely victimized by?
Thoughts when you heard that?
I thought, surely he really didn't say this, and surely there was not laughter. And you expect that with Phil Bredesen, my opponent, being in the audience, that he would have said, we don't say things like that. We don't wish someone's demise or death. But Ainsley...
Pause it for 1 second. I want to make it clear. Stephen Cohen did not wish for her death, just that she would jump off a bridge.
Maybe a nice dip in some cool water.
Right.
Maybe the bridge is really, really low.
Could be
It's just
very
a
low.
Nice country.
Maybe you need fun. But seriously, Congresswoman, is there any more things that you could be aggrieved about?
Tell you, I believe in what Matthew 5 commands us, and that we pray for our enemies. And that is something I do every day. And just like I pray for our nation's leaders, I pray for our president, I pray for my colleagues, I prayed for President Obama. That is what we as Christians are commanded to do. So I do it. But
Pause it for 1 second. Not for nothing, it turns out Stephen Cohen, Jewish, not a Christian. Continue.
And I will tell you, I do think that Phil Bredesen, he didn't call out Steve Cohen. He didn't call out Mark Brown, another of their spokesmen, who called Trump supporters in Tennessee idiots and morons and said they weren't worth the time and weren't listening. And that is completely inappropriate.
Congresswoman, thank you so much for listing your sense of aggrievement today on today's program.
I'm more impressed by the Bredesen campaign than I realized.
Yeah.
I remember, I think he's a pretty conservative Democrat, but I just, from jump off the bridge to Trump supporters are a bunch of idiots.
At least he's telling it
yeah,
like it is.
Sounds like some good goddamn down-home common sense coming out of the Tennessee Democratic Party.
And, we got one more thing. Here, I should just say, broadly speaking, it is like in that Jason Kessler video where his dad crashes the party. It would be nice if every time a white nationalist got in front of a camera that their dad would crash the party. But apparently that's why Tucker Carlson broadcasts from a studio, so that he has security to keep his parents from telling him to stop doing this.
Stop doing that Nazi stuff out of my house. Like Tucker's dad sounds exactly like him, but just stop talking like a Nazi.
Here is Tucker Carlson with Victor Davis Hanson. He is a writer for the National Review who's written such articles like "End Birthright Citizenship Now." He is he's got a one step away from Stephen Miller because he works at that Center for Immigration Studies. Here we go. Here's
well, supporters of mass immigration are always telling you that all immigration...
Pause it. Stories of mass immigration, right? Like this is a new term. Mass immigration. Not illegal immigration. Mass immigration. In other words, allowing immigrants in. More than one. Take it from the top.
Where it's from or... Well, supporters of mass immigration are always telling you that all immigration, no matter where it's from or who's coming, is good for America. They seldom give you numbers to back that up because there aren't any. Here's some other numbers. A new report by the Center for Immigration Studies found that more than half of all refugees in this country are currently on food stamps, living off taxpayer largesse. They're not the only ones benefiting from the U.S. welfare state. Even illegal immigrants.
Half of all refugees who enter in. In other words, half of the people who come from, let's say, a war-torn country or a place where all of their belongings were destroyed in some type of earthquake, half of them are living on food stamps. We don't know how long they've been here, right? Because they're still refugees. So they probably haven't been here that long. So we're supporting these people who have suffered horrible tragedies to the tune of almost, maximum $200 a month to eat. So it's not even mass immigration. Refugees, folks.
Are receiving welfare on behalf of their children who are automatically treated as U.S. citizens. It has long been assumed that anyone born here is automatically a citizen, and the Constitution requires that. But in fact, that might not be the case. In a recent Washington Post piece, former Trump administration official Michael Anton argued the president could issue tomorrow an executive order that the children of illegal immigrants are not to be treated as citizens. And why wouldn't he do that? Could the president do that? And if so, why isn't he? Victor Davis Hanson is a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution. He joins us tonight. Victor Davis Hanson, thanks very much for coming on. So it's a simple question. If it is true that the Constitution does not mandate citizenship for anyone born here, regardless of status or the status of his parents, then why are we acting like that's the law?
Well, I think it's because the 14th Amendment following the Civil War was aimed to address the problems of post-Civil War slavery. Nobody really who drafted that law dreamed that we would have 4 million people born to foreign nationals, most of whom were here illegally, who would be granted citizenship. So it's kind of murky, and we have about 150 years of jurisprudence that can't quite adjudicate what they meant. And we have a court difficulties and disagreements. But I think what we could do, Tucker, is that we're the only real country that people want to go here, with the exception of Canada, that allows birth tourism or to people to become citizens whose parents are not only not citizens but may be here illegally. Europe doesn't do it. The most liberal socialist countries in Europe, Asia, most of Africa, they do not do it. It's mostly a new world phenomenon, and it's really only applies to the United States because that's where people want to come. So.
Yeah, there you go. So it's just one of those things. We got to go back to slavery days. People when they passed the 14th Amendment could imagine all sorts of things, but this is the one thing they couldn't imagine.
I mean, we know, though, that this is, there's those reports that they've been drawing up those new rules, that they're guidelines that they're going to release in November about deporting people who are here legally, who've ever used anything, including Obamacare.
Yep.
And this is, I no doubt, this is actually where I think they do coordinate very closely. and it is super synchronized with the policy and the propaganda you'll see on Fox, and then the kind of think tank world of Victor Davis Hanson. That he's been around for a while, right?
Yes.
He was a big Iraq invasion promoter, right? Yeah.
Indeed. Calling from a 208 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Sam. This is Kevin calling from Idaho.
Kevin from Idaho. What's on your mind?
Hey, so I wanted to talk about the UBI, and I just wanted to clarify that a certain individual is very supportive of it.
Okay. Do you want to be a little bit less cagey about it? Why don't you just tell us?
Okay, sorry. Charles Murray said the UBI is to be financed by getting rid of Social Security,
right?
Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps.
Right.
Yeah.
This is, I mean, look,
Yeah.
there is a libertarian support for the UBI, not all libertarians, but that want to use it as a mechanism to get rid of the other infrastructure we have that is supportive of people. I am not for that. I mean, I have some serious reservations about UBI across the board, frankly. And that's a prominent one.
Yeah, and I guess I do want to be clear. I would support sort of a UBI system that would go along with the current social programs we have. But I guess I just sorry for the initial part, but yeah, I guess I just want to be clear that the more conservative tactic for UBI is to sort of use it to get rid of all other social programs.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Appreciate the call. Thanks, man. That is true. That is true. We have said that many times over the years that we have talked about this. Calling from a 214 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? (214) 214 going once. 214 going twice. Gone. Gone. Calling from a 608 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Sam. This is Shane calling from Wisconsin.
Shane from Wisconsin. What do you think about the results, Shane? Is Scott Walker in trouble?
Hopefully. Look, just out of pure political expediency, I have nothing but good things to say about Tony Evers until November.
Okay.
But I want to talk about our Wisconsin revolution and how, frankly, the political malpractice they've done.
Okay.
Right. So I'm looking at, with our Wisconsin Revolution and the Wisconsin Working Families Party teamed up to create Wisconsin Choice, where the two of them together endorsed candidates. And I'm looking at their choice for governor. I've been on their email list. I keep waiting. What's their choice for governor? What's their choice for governor? So I'm going to read this right now. See if you can figure out how the math doesn't add up here. In pursuit, it says, meet the final four candidates. In pursuit of our ultimate goal, restoring a government in Madison that represents the people, we hosted 3 rounds of voting to narrow toward a people's champion. We just wrapped up our 3rd final round vote, and none of the 4 candidates, received the 50% plus 1 of the vote required to be endorsed. So we will now be supporting the final 4. And so you had 4 candidates, but in the voting you had to get 50% plus 1. And they just couldn't narrow it down to 1, so they endorsed all 4. And so now I'm looking at the New York Times primary results. Tony Evers is at the top with 41.8%. And guess who the next 4 names are right after him? All 4 of the candidates endorsed by Wisconsin's Choice, because their rules said they had to have 51%. You couldn't have a sudden death round or anything else to narrow it down to 1 frickin' candidate. And when you add up the percentages for all 4, it adds up to 44.8%, which, golly gee, that's 3 points ahead of Tony Evers.
So okay.
like,
So your point is they have a really stupid system of determining that.
Yes. I
It
mean,
sure
you have
sounds
four
like it.
candidates, and you've got to have 50% or more.
Right. It sure sounds like it. That was a big mistake because
Yes.
theoretically, an endorsement from them and then a specific application of their resources could have made a difference. Could have.
Yeah, because we had eight. I mean, I know this isn't determinative, but we had 8 candidates running, and even if they lost, if they had the story going in the media of establishment candidate Tony Evers versus our Wisconsin Revolution, Wisconsin's choice candidate, whoever, I mean, Bernie Sanders is still relevant despite losing against Hillary, and is still seen as establishment Democrats versus Bernie Democrats. It's just, I'm pulling my hair over this, and the thing is, it's just like you said with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. You need a good message, but you also need some skills. Well, there's a third thing. You need some gamesmanship.
Yep.
There's a game. There's a way you win the game.
Well,
anyhow,
listen, hang in
my
there.
rant.
Hang in there. Obviously, and I think you're smart to suck it up and support Evers. To get Scott Walker out of that office would basically end his career, and that would be, I think, a good thing for everybody. Everybody. Yeah. Calling from a 501 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Matthew from Arkansas.
Matthew from Arkansas. What's on your mind?
Hey, good afternoon. I was calling because I wanted to say 2 quick things. You know, I listened to the clip with Steven you had earlier, and then I listened to the clip you had, I think it was a couple days ago with Miss Cortez and Cuomo.
Okay.
No, with Chris Cuomo. And I wanted to say that no one should ever ask how we're going to pay for universal health care and, college free, or tuition-free college when these crackheads want to build a space force.
Right.
Nobody ever asks, oh, how are you going to pay for this, or how are you going to pay for the rocket ship? And I think that's so stupid, because it's common sense, but nobody ever asks, well, where do we get the money for this war, or where do we get the money for that? And I think it's really stupid that when you want to help someone, that's when you ask, well, where is this money going to come from?
Exactly.
I
mean,
think
I would be curious. I mean, I wonder if like Media Matters has done something like this. Like, how many times were politicians asked over the course of the past, 6-7 months, where are you getting the extra $70 billion a year for this defense authorization bill? Like, where is this money coming from? And I would bet nobody asked that question. I would bet, honestly, that question, I could see theoretically Hayes asking that question, but I would say the vast majority of these people have not asked that question because it's just taken for granted. We'll find the money. We need it. And the fact is, we need $70 billion more for our defense authorization. I can't even make a comparison as to how much more we need things like free college option for people, or debt forgiveness for those people who have spent that money, or single-payer health care. We need those things or infrastructure. We need these things so much more than we need that extra 10, 12% for the military. It's absurd. But you're absolutely
Sam,
right. I appreciate the call.
If they don't have Space Force, how are they going to piece out of Earth when their corporate friends finally ruin the planet?
That's right.
The rest of the way.
It's more like a space revolutionary guard for the wealthy people. Appreciate the call.
Oh, look at Hayes asking about how you pay for the freaking Space Force. What a hobo.
Calling from 650 area code.
I
Who's
always
this?
think of that character with regards to Hayes. I don't know why.
It's his bête noire.
Yeah.
Calling
Hey,
from
Sam, this is VK.
VK, what's on your mind?
Hey, VK from Australia. How are you guys doing today?
Good. How you doing, VK from Australia?
I'm doing okay. I saw you guys did a piece on legal immigration crackdown some days back.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to share some of my observations.
Okay.
So I was living in the U.S. prior to living here for almost a decade, and I still have friends over there. So I was living there on the temporary work visa, and back when I was living there, it used to take 8 to 9 years to convert from the work visa to a green card, and that used to create a lot of problems for the temporary working visa folks. And it also creates a permanent underclass of temporary workers who don't have a lot of options for employment in many sense. So now what has happened with the Trump administration, what I'm hearing and what I'm reading is, what they're putting in place now is previously when you sent your petition for temporary work visa renewal and or new application, if they had some questions about your application, they would send you requests for more information. Now, the new mandate they have put in place is no questions are going to be asked, and they're going to reject it outright if they have any minor deviation in paperwork or anything like that. So that's like a very drastic move from the previous administrations. Even Obama did a lot of restriction on temporary work visa, but that was in 2009, 2010 time frame. And it was post GFC, so it was kind of driven by the economic needs and populism and whatnot. But now it's like you say, it's mostly driven by kind of driving a implicit or unsaid terror in immigrants that
Right.
they should not be here.
Of course.
For some one reason or another. I'll give you two more examples of what's going on. So I talked about the no recourse for appeals anymore.
Yeah.
And the H-1B rejection rate overall, the temporary visa rejection rate, has gone through the roof, and the amount of paperwork needed now has gone tenfold. So it's just getting impractical and impossible for companies to file for new temporary visas. And the last thing is, during the Obama era, he didn't do a lot for the legal immigrants, but at least he, going out of the door, he did a good move that the spouses of legal immigrants, under certain conditions, could work
Right.
on certain
DAPA, I think it's
certain
DAPA, right?
Something like that. I've been out of that record for
Yes.
a while. So,
All right. Well,
so now every quarter, Stephen Miller or someone like that floats the idea that that's going away. Even though that has not gone away, I know a lot of people, it has affected their planning and their way of life.
Of course.
And
just
it's
floating
disruptive overall.
VK, yes, and I appreciate the phone call. Just floating these measures is effective for them because, like you said, and I've been saying, their agenda is to terrorize. And this is one, to say like we may bring about these measures is just one way of basically making these people's lives miserable. Calling from a 484 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, can you hear me?
I can. Who's this?
Hi, this is Brett. I'm calling from Bangkok, Thailand.
Brett from Bangkok, Thailand. Well, what's on your mind, Brett?
Hi, so I'm actually from Pennsylvania, and I'm calling about the teacher who called last night talking about cyber charter schools. I actually went to a cyber charter school when I was in high school for like my senior year and a bit of the year before that.
Wow.
So I thought I could maybe give some of the good and bad of it and maybe like a feet on the ground perspective.
Okay, do.
What years were these when you were at this cyber charter school?
So I'm about 29, and I was going, I guess I must have been like 16 or 17. Pennsylvania was kind of like, I don't know, depending on you could say forward thinking or whatever. They were doing it earlier than I think a lot of other states for whatever reason. I don't know the politics of it. Yeah, should we start with like the good or the bad?
Let's start with the good.
So the good is the particular school that I went to, I thought was pretty good. I think the kind of use case of it is limited, but there were a lot of people in the school that I think you could see why it was useful to have a cyber school rather than like a brick and mortar. So there are people with like health problems, like these kids in it that they were like super allergic to different types of mold. So they were almost like bubble boys or something.
Well, actually, that's what I was
there are
thinking
people
about.
who are
'Cause
like,
I do remember the boy in the plastic bubble. There was that scene where he would. They had developed some special thing where he could be seen in school, and that was like a big deal. Like Skype, it looked like. But yeah, go ahead.
yeah, that's the thing. So this was like maybe like 11 or 12 years ago, and yeah, it was kind of before Skype was known. And the school I was at, they had their own kind of Skype thing. They would provide you they provided you a computer, and you would Skype into classes, and a lot of it was independent learning, but you did have to check in and all this stuff. We can get into how other schools didn't do that when we get into the bad, but that was some of the good.
Why did you do
there
it,
were
Brett?
there were kids who like.
Why did you do it? Did you have
So
one
for
of those
me-
allergies, or?
No, for me personally, I just did it my senior year, and frankly, I was just kind of fed up with school. Like, I was having a lot of like disciplinary issues, not for any real. Honestly, I didn't do drugs. I didn't get into fights, but I would just get into trouble constantly for being like late to class or talking back. And I just had so many infractions, and I would get in-school suspensions all the time. And I just kind of argued with my parents, like, look, you know that I'm a really good student. Let me just finish in cyber school. And that's pretty much why. I didn't have a fantastic reason.
All right.
But I think that's a decent reason as well. So a lot of my like personal friends also ended up doing cyber school, and I guess I'll get into like the bad of it. So they're charter schools, so it's a Wild West, or again, this is like 10 years ago. It's like a Wild West, and it's kind of up to the parents and the students to figure it out. Your guidance counselor at your brick and mortar school is not going to help you. So we did a lot of online research and picked a good school. But some of my other friends who also cyber schooled had some horror stories. Like I had a friend who was taking like an art course at a cyber charter so that he could work and give money to his family so that they could eat and stuff. His art teacher didn't ever assign him any assignments, and eventually he said, like, what's the deal? And the guy was like, look, let me give you a deal. Just don't mention that I didn't sign anything, and I'll give you a C. You can see
a C.
That
What
issue
deal
there.
is that?
Even for yeah, I know. Right?
It's supposed to be an A.
And so there is, and it really, even at my school, there was a lot of self-motivation needed, because they're assuming, like, some of the kids like professionals, like they're doing motocross or ballet or something professionally. So they allow you to, some things have deadlines, and some things you kind of had like the whole semester to do it. And so honestly, I would just wait until like the end of the semester and do like a year's worth of work at the end, because I could kind of handle that. Yeah, I think bottom line, I would say that the concept of cyber schooling makes sense and has a use case. And, for some people, it's really a useful thing. Other people, maybe they're just being bullied or whatever. But
I mean, let's be
obviously,
honest.
I think you
There
guys
shouldn't be that many of them, right?
No, exactly.
The very
The problem is that
nature.
they're charter schools.
The problem is they're charter schools, and the problem is they're for-profit enterprises, and the problem is they're completely funded by, or they're funded by the government. And if we want to have a cyber school, obviously there's a need for it, right? I mean, there are students who can't come in and be with the student population. There are some who would rather not for whatever reasons, but all you need is one. Like, the very nature of them is all you need is maybe you want one to stay. I don't know. You need to talk to an educator as to what would maximize the situation. But or you need one curriculum. Maybe you have teachers, so that you can address the students in where they are. But it does not need to be a charter situation. If there is a need for these, then it should be public schooling, so that we have the proper oversight for this stuff, and proper accountability. But interesting story. I appreciate the call, man.
All right, thanks, Sam. See ya.
Swati Cop. Cop kun cop.
I did not realize they had been around for so long.
Yeah. Well, they couldn't have been along much earlier than that because you're talking dial-up, and that would have been just exhausting. Calling from an 886 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, Sam. This is Chris from Taiwan.
Hello, Chris from Taiwan. It's like International Day around here.
So, first of all, John from San Antonio's Twitter handle is amazing. I really, really like that guy.
Yeah.
Shut the fuck up.
So what I was calling about.
Yeah.
So, it seems like increasingly clear by now that the Trump N-word tape probably does exist. And, with a little luck, it will be released and everyone will hear it. But there seems to be a debate going on as to whether or not it would actually make any difference, right?
Yeah.
I actually think that it would make a difference. And the reason I think that is that, a mean old white man with a history of verbally abusing minorities getting caught throwing that word around is something that I think like even the most impressive mental gymnastics can't ignore. Like even centrists and liberals and media personalities who have been reluctant to call him a racist would have to say uncle. I think.
I think.
So,
go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I think there's a bigger lesson to be learned here, which is, that when you see the warning signs of racism, a lot of times where there's smoke, there's probably fire. Like, you don't need to see someone wearing white sheets or using the N-word to know what they're all about. When you hear people using these dog whistles or bullhorns, as the case may be, or when you hear these like so-called classical liberals or skeptics or centrists just tiptoeing that line between acceptable discourse and just crude racism, that's probably indicative of something. And I think that, go ahead.
Well, I think you have two very good points. On the first one, I think you're right about that. There is something, particularly when you talk about like the mainstream media, I would say. I mean, put aside who it's going to impact in terms of voters. I think it will. I don't know how many, but some. But it's also going to release the mainstream media from any hesitation about how to characterize things going forward. I mean, I remember in college, there was an incident where I think it was a player on our lacrosse team had called another kid on another team the N-word. And the college is like reacted like, can you believe this? And I'm like, can I believe it? Yeah, of course. I mean, have you seen these guys? Yeah, these guys are racist. There's a whole bunch of racism on this campus. I wasn't diminishing the name call, but I was just sort of like taken aback. Like, really? Like, wait, this is what you're reacting to? You haven't seen?
That's what it takes for people to notice it.
And I think the mainstream media, I think it will then become impossible for them not to characterize the dog whistles in the future as racist. Like they will. It is the one thing. And I will say this, racism itself is also the one thing that the mainstream media, in terms of these dynamics, really takes seriously. Like they
look
will
for the warning signs,
right? Like they won't,
like my discriminatory housing.
Like
practices.
They're allergic to the idea that this could be. I mean, in many respects, anti-woman or certainly anti-gay or anti-trans. But when it comes to racism, this is where the mainstream media sort of gets its bona fides of actually being, responsible. It's low hanging fruit for them, and particularly if something like this. So it's going to change that tenor of that stuff without a doubt. I agree.
I think of that guy in the focus group. I've mentioned him several times, but it just struck me like. He supported Trump, not the guy who apologized, but the guy who was just like the middle-aged white dude who was like, he's racist. They're like, why do you say that now? Because he called LeBron an idiot. And, I guess, obviously you'd be critical and be like, how did you not tell? Of course this guy's a racist. But you know what? If that was the thing that tipped it, cool. And that is actually an example of a guy,
and wait,
clearly in his case.
What was your second point? You had two.
I just said, well, no, you already addressed it.
Okay.
Can I say one more thing real quick, though?
So yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm leaving Taiwan in a couple weeks. I'm coming back to the States to join the fight. I'm going to work on a political campaign.
Wow.
I want to plug my friend who's running for office.
Okay.
My friend, Zach Stevenson, he's running for the Minnesota State House in District 36A. And, the Minnesota legislature is red right now, but it's got a good chance of tipping blue this year. And that's really important for a lot of reasons. But one big reason is that the state legislatures, draw the voting districts, right?
Yes.
So, hopefully the courts will take care of gerrymandering or whatever. But in the meantime, the only way to fight that is to get our people in office. But anyway, so his website, if anyone would care. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to tell us the website, but I was going to say send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com with the link. But tell us the website for right now.
Oh, it's real short. www.zack.mn. www.zack.mn. I'll send you an email too.
All right, good.
But if anyone is feeling inclined to donate, he could use the help.
All right, appreciate the call.
And he's turning over the table in the swamp.
Turning the table in the swamp. I do
over
think
the tables in the swamp.
Nice.
Matt's going to be looking over his shoulder when he comes back here.
What was the second thing that he was talking about, though? Because I had one more thought on that.
I thought he was talking about like the classical liberals and the like. The
yeah. That where there's sort of like a little bit of smoke, there's fire, without a doubt. Look, I don't think, particularly in this era, I just don't think. I mean, definitionally, look, and I will also preface it by saying, at the very least, we all have a very healthy dose of white supremacy embedded in us. And I would say that's not just in terms of white people, but I think a significant number of black people also, because, they're products of the society they live in. But I think that if you are not overly sensitive to this issue, particularly in this day and age, where you don't really contemplate and think about the implications of what you're saying, that definitionally you are racist. And you are doing something definitionally racist. Particularly if you do this on an ongoing basis. I mean, there are moments where I think people are not sensitive or not aware. Like, I've said things like that never occurred to me. Like, oh, it's a saying. Like at one point, as an example, like off the reservation. I said that at one point. Somewhat recently, it never occurred to me like, oh yeah, it's not an appropriate term. It's, it doesn't mean what it meant literally, but it is sort of reinforcing the idea of like, look, gotta stay on the reservation.
Gotta be on the res. Gotta be on the res.
But, yeah, I agree with that as well. All right, let's got a little bit more IMs going here for a second. JJ Cool. I hope every accelerationist realizes the amount of damage that can still be done and lives lost before any change can come about. Nick from Manitoba. Hey, Sam, great show today. That John from San Antonio call was one of the best things I've heard all week. Aside from the litany of other laudable reasons, I think John is amazing. When the man is asked if he's on Twitter, he doesn't jump to immediately plug his Twitter. Nay, And what a nay, for here lies the rub. The man, though unparalleled humbleness, recommends the account of a fella he follows and likes to retweet before he even considers plugging himself. Phenomenal. K. Pizzagatti. I think John in San Antonio missed that of the almost 1 million votes in the primary in Minnesota, Democrats got over 65% of the vote. Also, Paul Nealon got 6,000 votes in Wisconsin. Good job, Republicans. James 224 intersectional. Question for Jamie. When will the DSA become true intersectional and start a pansexual Gundam fan fiction caucus?
We're working on it, all right?
I love Sarah Palin. I want to just defend the neo-Nazis quickly. I believe in free speech and the rule of law. I'm sure there are some people in Antifa that are good people, but the Nazis had permits. Ben Shapiro is actually very smart. I heard he went on Fox to talk about AOC's comments toward him on Twitter. He said she was playing the victim card, so he used her own logic against her and out-victim her.
Holla, holla, holla. Let me talk to you, woman. Come on, Ma.
Mary Lou from Connecticut. Yeah, Sam, good afternoon. It gives me no pleasure to say this, but I want to thank those Pennsylvania clergymen. Actually, I can't do this. Forget it. Drop those human pieces of crap in a volcano. Thanks for taking my IM. Be silly. Hey, everybody, you don't need to be an economist to do math. Even if we stipulate that cutting taxes bumps activity in the economy and the tax base grows a little bit, the idea that lowering tax rates can increase the actual tax revenue is totally different. As an effective 20% rate in the U.S., wouldn't that require tax base to increase by 5 times the amount of the tax cut? Sounds ridiculous. Of course. Vespa. Last week, Michael pronounced my name Vespa. Yesterday, which is an Italian scooter, it's Vespa. Also,
Okay,
it's
Vespa.
Vespa says Jay-Z is better than Nas. Also, I found John from San
never gonna
Antonio's
be pronounced
Twitter.
right.
Kako Foos Minute left his best. Nom 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 Chomsky. That guy hyperventilating about Russia on last Friday's show, Noam Chomsky said the line about Russia being a distraction and a joke just a week before on Democracy Now! If he needs help finding it, and a line about every president since Truman being a war criminal by our own standards set up at Nuremberg is something he said maybe 5,000 times. If you couldn't find those quotes, you weren't looking. Now take a breath, Russia hysteria, buddy. Winnipeg Craig. Glad you guys like the Pizzagatti video. Still hoping Cernovich stops you, but no word from him yet. Also, regarding Ned Lamont, is the 4-day-a-week working man really complaining about someone taking off time? Thank you. I will add, it is 4 days a week on the show. That does not mean that I'm not working. This place does not run itself.
Doesn't mean I'm not working.
It's
Doesn't
true.
mean
I've
that
got
I'm filing claims. I'm
Filing
getting involved
claims.
in Twitter conflicts.
That's true. That's all part of the job.
He's raising the next generation of cranky pundits. Don't forget social reproduction.
That's true. Social reproduction.
Yeah, social
customer
reproduction
service.
all over the place.
Just
I
wanted
do-
to draw your
I do all
attention.
sorts of social reproduction, do you see?
Just wanted to draw your attention to the San Antonio teenager who's been detained by ICE because of his activism. There has been an encampment outside the ICE processing facility in San Antonio for over a month demanding ICE leave the city. About a week ago, one of the leaders was arrested by ICE and is currently in a detention facility. 18-year-old boy who goes by the name Mapache had DACA but was informed upon his arrest that his latest application was denied because he was a bad person. Officials told him they would help him with his case if he gave them information on protest activities. He refused to cooperate. People like Mapache are heroes of the movement, but it shouldn't just be the most vulnerable people putting their bodies on the line. People like you and me, U.S. citizens, need to get as militant as this 18-year-old facing deportation. Fighting for a more democratic society has always been a dangerous endeavor, but safety is never guaranteed. But without those in our past who are willing to put their lives on the line, black people would still be on the plantation, women in the kitchen, 8-year-olds would be on their smoke break at a factory. I'm not calling for violence, but we're going to have to get a lot more militant before this is over. Free Mapache.
doesn't
Let's
work,
see if we
gonna
can
do the
find a
Gaddafi
story
option.
on that. We see
Yeah.
if you can Google that and find it.
And please feel free to email about us with links.
Sam's Tinder profile. Hey, girl, swipe right. Look at my clean-shaven face. I did that for you. Well, this is not very imaginative.
Step
But,
up your game, Sam's Tinder profile.
But I will try it.
I'm looping into so bad it's good category territory now.
Blusters, don't you think a fighting strategy is at least as important as an intelligent policies? We like to intellectualize how left is best, but it's no good if we can't fight the lies. How should our candidates deal with the aggressive right? Well, I agree with that. You've got to have good messaging. You've got to respond quickly to this stuff, without a doubt. And I mean, I think, having good policies makes it super easy. I mean, just watch Bernie. The guy's so maniacally on point. There's really no question you can't ask him in which his answer doesn't involve like his three major policy points. How was your day? It'd be better with $15 minimum wage.
Literally. I think
honestly,
even in Ocasio's case, I got to be careful how I make this point because I don't want people to misinterpret. I think she is extremely charismatic, but I also think that like the same charisma attached to vacuous and unclear, mushy policies would not come across at all in any way the same way. It might even be off.
Is that right? But feel your pain.
Exactly.
It did come off. I mean,
yeah. I mean, a lot of people didn't trust it. A lot of people liked it though. I think I gotta say I do think Bill Clinton and Barack Obama are in their own charisma category. I think they're in their own thing.
I'll tell you something. Let's check in 10 years and see where Ocasio-Cortez is. Because
we'll check in 10 years.
For someone who's been a politician for 6 months,
definitely
nuts.
Right, and also I think that this culture's sense of what charisma is changes, and Bill Clinton's kind of corn pone thing I don't think really fits for today's world.
He is so creepy.
Well, he's also, who knows? Look, he was a product of his era.
Well, no. That's literally what I'm saying. I think he was an amazing. I'm not talking about ethics or badness or any of that. I'm saying his specific kind of charisma. Yeah.
But I don't know that if you were to somehow like take 19-year-old Bill Clinton and put him 19 years old 10 years ago, if he wouldn't have just
he'd crush it. He'd crush it. Totally.
He wouldn't be corn pone.
No, he'd be like,
he'd be something else.
Here's another thing that we need to think about when we have a DSA meeting.
Oh, he would have been Me Too'd.
There's going to be, don't get me wrong, there's aliens from outer space who are Stalinists, but that doesn't mean that we don't need to reach out to the grape pickers as well. See, we can synthesize all of this.
I think you're right about the Me Too thing, but the whole point is that like at one point society starts getting the message, and those guys who would have been Me Too, the I don't know what to call it, the Me Tooers, we get less of them because society is like raising them properly.
Our whole concept of personal space has entirely changed.
Chris from Canada. Hey, Sam, it was my birthday on Friday, and I couldn't get a live feed. Well, then you get one of these for today. Sorry it's late. Worst birthday ever. Anyway, I was wondering what the MR Crew's thoughts are on the Courage Foundation booting Barrett Brown because of his negative comments about Julian Assange. I was just reading about this. I support the mission of WikiLeaks, but I'm becoming skeptical of the organization and any attachment with Assange's authoritarian tendencies. I've been looking at Barrett Brown's new project and seeing, if there's an opportunity to have him on to talk about that. And I read his response to that foundation, and I feel like WikiLeaks, to the extent that and I think at one point I certainly appreciated what they were doing at one point, and that point changed for me certainly before 2016. I thought the leaks that they had in terms of Manning were, and the associated leaks with that at those cables were really important. People downplayed them, but I went on cable news for 2 or 3 years where, 40% of the stories were a function of those leaks, and it was never mentioned. Not all their stuff was good. They did all the Climate Gate stuff. They were the ones who got released that stuff from Climate Gate, which was not helpful.
Work. They even did stuff that they exposed corruption in Kenya. They did Scientology. I mean, they had a run there. Where they had a run,
but the Climate Gate stuff was not good. They were the ones who released those emails.
Oh, you
But
mean more
look,
recent? Okay.
No, not more recent. That was years ago. And
I don't recall that one.
And people
The
don't know that
bad
they were
side of it?
associated. But clearly they've lost their purpose. They've lost way of what their purpose was. Assange, I don't care who he is as a, jerk or not a jerk. I think I'm skeptical that there was some type of honeypot situation or whatever it is, but should, face those charges maybe, I think is important. I'm based on what I know, I don't know that the United States should be prosecuting him, but I have a feeling there's stuff I don't know that maybe they may have more of a claim to.
Oh, really? You don't feel pretty strongly like I think Assange is total trash, but I do think that if he was prosecuted for anything related to journalistic activities, that's very well.
Well, that's right. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay.
But
you're saying that there might be something else that they don't. That they. You mean like intelligence agency links?
I don't know. I don't know. I just, my assessment of him has gone down considerably, and I don't know. But I don't think that he should be prosecuted for anything that I'm aware of at this point. And, but he's not the type of guy I would go to the mat for. And I think this type of stuff. How do you kick out Barrett Brown? The guy went to jail.
Right.
For his work of this ilk. And his criticism of WikiLeaks, the idea that you would kick him out of this organization is just absurd to me. So that's where I'm at in that. John from San Antonio, Jazz Cigarette. Do you think the recent trend of women winning Democratic primaries will help push Cynthia Nixon over the top? No. I think she's having a tough time with the campaign on some level, and I think part of it is just because Cuomo has co-opted a lot of her stuff. Hey, MR Crew. Michael Shermer of the Skeptic magazine announced on Twitter they will be doing a feature issue on Jordan Peterson, and it seems like it will be much more celebratory than critical. The skeptic atheist movement has devolved largely into anti-SJW white male aggrievement. They dunk on stuff like creationists and flat earthers to show how logical they are before dragging in straw men of social justice to denigrate.
Right.
There are some good podcasts left, but nearly all the skeptics on YouTube are just anti-SJW shitlords who praise and align with Peterson.
Right.
Sargon and the like.
Yes.
Jeremo, I got it. Conservatives don't want socialists and government elected officials because socialists are smart, and smart people leading the way will improve the common good. Otto de Chat, please do more commentary on Gorka. The last piece on his false Fox business card was hilarious. We're just waiting for his next false business card. Joe from Raleigh, listening to Sam explain the history of Ned Lamont to a young Michael Brooks is hilarious. Back in the day, we had an evil ogre named Joe Lieberman, and one day a brave knight named Ned came along. Paul, cyber schools. In the mid-'90s when I started high school, the internet wasn't fast enough, but they had something called computer-based training, CBT, which came in CD form. We had computer networking class that was based off of CBT curriculum. Producer Lauren, hi. Just a reminder that some of the asylum seekers being held in the, what did the woman call them, former FEMA camps, are indigenous people descended from Mayans, Olmecs of Chiapas State, Guatemala, and so forth, who can't speak a lick of Spanish, much less English. ICE was not prepared for this, is why the ACLU and La Raza have called for translators fluent in indigenous languages to help. Bash the fash. Trump change. Hey, Sammy, I'm the guy who caught his colon cancer after your colonoscopy show prompted me to get checked out 10 years ago. Oh, wow. I've just recovered from my 4th surgery since then, but I'm actually feeling healthy and happy. I just wanted to thank you again. Well, dude, take this.
Wow.
That's awesome.
That is amazing.
That is awesome. I don't think I heard that.
Social reproduction, dude.
That was a you know what I did for that show? That was on Break Room Live.
Is that the one where you went under?
I went under for the colonoscopy, and I gave them my video camera, and I said, record me as I wake up. And it was a lot of jibber jabber.
Nice.
Yep. And I think I showed pictures of the video I got from the colonoscopy.
Of the Social Security Trust Fund.
I had a falling out with that doctor over insurance claims.
Oh, was that recent?
That was that. This was
That was
the next
pretty
one.
recent.
This was like 5 years later. I got another one. Oh, my phone dropped. All right. We don't have time for any more phone calls. I'm sorry, folks. Phone is dropped. We'll take 4 more IMs. Ben Shapiro's Grinder account. Hey. Oh, okay. I'm not going to do that one. Bingo Mosquito. Cohen only wished Trump would say a thing about jumping. All assumptions that Blackburn would jump and die came from those who would jump if Trump told them so. Colin from Nebraska. Attention all listeners all around Nebraska. All day Saturday, August 25th in Lincoln is Nebraska's first Red State Conference. Red State is hosted by local leftist organizations, including Omaha and Lincoln DSA, Nebraska Left Coalition, Black Cat House. Search Red State 2018 on Facebook for more details.
I certainly will.
Neferfiti. Michael, would you debate Coleman Hughes? He's the guy Sam Harris on about Beyond Politics of Race.
I would have a open exchange of ideas with Coleman Hughes. Sure.
Max Refractor. Sam, I've been asking. Please bring in Mark Maron. I will see if he will do that.
You're asking.
Reefer Reno. Sam, do you think guys like Colbert and Kimmel are wittingly putting down liberal ideas like AOC interview on Colbert? Or are they honestly against social democracy? I don't know that Colbert is. Maybe. I don't know. Jimmy Reefer Cake. Everybody got a little reefer madness. My Twitter stream last night. I explained on my live stream. Brooks, you son of a bitch. You said you think a song is total trash. Well, then that's what it... Then what is that make you?
What? I don't even know which song. I thought I'd been actually complimentary of the songs recently, but that was a trash I am.
Sam, I'm getting sick of people pointing out that progressive candidates are losing most of their races. They don't consider the context of their races. First, before 2016, they probably had no chance other than a thin chance to win. Yeah, I think that's true. And the final IM of the day. Wow. Last night in California, Mike Ness from Social Distortion as throwback band. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it.
Oh, Sean loves them.
Jumped off the stage and kicked the shit out of a Proud Boy who was heckling him. Remember when Gavin McInnes claimed conservatism is the new punk? Nice try.
Hell yeah.
See you folks tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bulb. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah.